morning arrived quietly. No alarm, no obligation. Just the pale gold light of a late May sunrise spreading slowly across the manicured lawns of Birchwood Lane in Harrowfield, Ohio, warming the tops of oak trees, casting long shadows across sidewalks nobody ever seemed to use. At 211 Birchwood Lane, a man was already in his front yard. Marcus Ellison had been up since 6. Not because of a court filing or a grand jury prep session. None of those things were waiting for him this morning. He was up because he wanted to be. Because for the first time in 11 years, a Saturday morning belonged entirely to him. And he intended to do something physical and real and satisfying with it. He was replacing the rotted fence posts along the eastern property line. The previous owners had let the old cedar posts go soft at the base, the wood eaten through by moisture and years of neglect. 3 of them leaning like old men who had given up on standing straight. Marcus had noticed it the first week after closing. He had ordered the new posts, the concrete mix, the hardware, all of it sitting in the garage for 2 weeks. And this morning he had finally dragged everything out and gotten to work. He was wearing a faded gray army t-shirt that had gone soft with washing, athletic shorts, a pair of worn leather work gloves. He was shirtless from the waist up, about 20 minutes in the morning heat already building faster than expected for late May. His broad shoulders caught the sun as he drove the post hole digger into the ground. Focused, rhythmic. The effort of a man who genuinely enjoyed this kind of work. Marcus Ellison was 52 years old. From a distance, what you noticed first was the physical presence. 6 feet even. Built wide through the chest and shoulders. Not from a gym, but from years of hard use. His hands were large and capable looking. The kind of hands that could hold a courtroom silent just by the way they rested flat on a table. His hair was close-cropped and almost entirely silver at the temples. His beard, kept neat, had gone the same way, the silver coming in early the way it does for men who have carried significant weight for a long time. His face in repose carried the particular composure of someone who had spent decades learning how to listen without reacting, not cold, not distant, just still. The kind of stillness you develop when you understand that every second of visible emotion can be used against your client. He'd grown up in Columbus, second of 4 children, the son of a postal worker and a high school librarian who had raised all 4 of them with the specific kind of discipline that comes from understanding exactly how much harder the world was going to make things for them than it would for others. His mother had put a law dictionary on the shelf between the encyclopedias and a children's Bible when Marcus was 8 years old. She never said anything about it directly. She did not need to. He went to Ohio State on an ROTC scholarship, earned his commission, served 2 years in the Army JAG Corps handling courts-martial with a precision that his commanding officers found almost unsettling in someone so young. Then he left the service and went directly to law school at Case Western. He graduated 3rd in his class. He was offered 4 positions at corporate firms in Cleveland. He turned all of them down. He spent the next 20 years as a public defender. 20 years in a chronically underfunded office, handling caseloads that no single attorney should ever have to carry. Representing men and women who had nothing. No money, no connections, no margin for error, against a machine that moved fast and favored the prosecution at every turn. Marcus had won cases that no one thought were winnable. He had lost cases that should never have been lost. He had sat across from clients in holding cells and listened to them describe what it felt like to be stopped for no reason, to be cuffed for asking a question, to be charged with resisting arrest when all they had done was stand still. He had taken those testimonies and built arguments from them. He knew where the lies lived in a police report, in the passive voice, in the vague attribution of aggression, in the phrase fearing for my safety attached to situations where no reasonable officer would have been afraid. 3 months ago, he had filed to run for district attorney of Caldwell County. He had not expected to win. He had expected to make a race of it, to force a public conversation, to put certain things on the record. He won by 11 points. He had been sworn in 18 days ago. He moved into 211 Birchwood Lane 16 days ago, closing on the house with a VA loan and the money he had saved across 30 years of never spending extravagantly on anything. The house was a 4-bedroom colonial with cream-colored siding and dark green shutters. An oak tree in the front yard that was older than anyone currently living on the street. The first night he had sat on the back porch with a glass of water and listened to the neighborhood settle into its nighttime sounds, and thought for the first time in a long time that he had done something good for himself. He had been the only black family on Birchwood Lane for the 16 days he had lived there. He had not counted on this being simple. He had just decided not to let it be a problem he spent energy worrying about before it became one. This morning it was just a Saturday, just fence posts, just good work in good light. He drove the post hole digger down, twisted, pulled. The Ohio clay came up red and resistant. Marcus leaned into the effort, getting below the frost line, making sure the holes were deep enough to hold. He worked steadily, pausing every so often to drink from the water bottle he had brought out with him, checking the string line he had pulled taut between 2 marker stakes to ensure the posts would go in straight. The street was quiet. A sprinkler ran somewhere to his left, a slow arc of water catching the sunlight in brief, disappearing rainbows. 2 houses down, an older white man walked a yellow lab toward the park. He did not look over. Marcus did not wave. He was 4 holes in when the curtain moved in the window of 209 Birchwood Lane. Patricia Holden had lived at 209 Birchwood Lane for 22 years. She had moved in with their husband Gerald the summer after their youngest went to college. Gerald was gone now. 7 years passed. A heart attack on a Thursday morning that had rearranged the architecture of Patricia's entire life. In those 22 years, she had watched the neighborhood change the way all neighborhoods change. Slowly, and then all at once. She knew every house on the block. She knew who lived in them, who had sold and moved away, who had planted what in their front garden, whose dog dug under the fence. She had taught 4th grade at Harrowfield Elementary for 31 years. The particular alertness that decades of managing 28 9-year-olds simultaneously had given her had never quite turned off. Even in retirement, she noticed everything out of place. Immediately. She was at her kitchen window with her second cup of coffee at 8:45 that Saturday morning when she saw the man in the yard next door. The house at 211 had sold in early May. She knew this. She had watched the for sale sign go up and come down. She had meant to introduce herself to the new owner, but had not found the occasion yet. What she saw now was a black man she had never seen before working along the property line with what appeared to be a large digging tool. Patricia set her coffee cup down. She told herself she was being reasonable. She did not know this man. He was working very close to the shared fence line. She told herself she would just watch for a few minutes. The man worked steadily. He was not furtive, wasn't looking around nervously, wasn't moving quickly in the way of someone who wanted to be somewhere before being noticed. He had a string line set between 2 stakes, the kind of methodical setup you do when you are doing a job properly. He had a water bottle on the grass beside him, but Patricia did not recognize him. And in 22 years she had come to believe that she recognized everyone who belonged here. She picked up her phone. She called the non-emergency line. She described a suspicious male she did not recognize digging along the property line of what she thought might still be a vacant property. The dispatcher flagged it as a suspicious person report and routed it to the nearest available unit. Patrol Car 31. Derek Pruitt. Derek Pruitt was 44 years old. 16 years with the Harrowfield Police Department. He was a large man, thick-necked and wide through the jaw, with pale blue eyes that sat too close together and gave him a permanently calculating expression that he had long since stopped noticing. His uniform always fit slightly too tightly across the chest and shoulders. He wore it with the particular self-consciousness of a man who believed the uniform was the most important thing about him. He had 11 formal complaints in his personnel file. 9 of the 11 involved men of color. Black or Latino men who had been stopped, searched, or physically subdued in incidents where the use of force was later deemed questionable. All 11 complaints had been dismissed or settled quietly. 3 had resulted in paid administrative leave. None had resulted in any lasting consequence. Captain Norris Landy had protected him twice from termination. Captain Landy believed with the sincere conviction of a man who had never once questioned his own instincts that Derek Pruitt was the kind of cop who got results. The union had backed Landy both times. In the break room at Harrowfield, PD Pruitt was called the Hammer. He liked it. He had cultivated it. He leaned into it the way certain men lean into any reputation that makes them feel large. This Saturday morning, he was doing a slow roll through the residential streets of Harrowfield Estates, the wealthiest zip code in his patrol zone. The streets he considered his personal responsibility to keep clean and ordered. He was in a foul mood, not for any specific reason, just the low-grade irritation that settled on men like Derek Pruitt when too much time had passed without an opportunity to remind someone of the hierarchy. Riding with him was Officer Shane Decker, 7 months out of the academy. Shane was 24 years old, tall, genuinely earnest, still new enough to the job to be disturbed when things went wrong. He had learned that riding with Greg Miller meant navigating a minefield of prejudice and hostility, and that the correct survival strategy for a rookie was to make himself quiet and small when Pruitt was in one of these moods. When the call came through, Pruitt snatched the radio mic before Decker could even process it. Confirmed response. Pulled the cruiser into gear and accelerated toward Birchwood Lane with a kind of purpose that made Decker's stomach tighten. He had seen this look before. He did not like what usually followed it. Pruitt turned the cruiser onto Birchwood Lane and spotted Marcus Ellison before the car had fully made the turn. He hit the brakes, easing to a crawl. His eyes locked onto the man in the yard with the particular fixed quality of a predator that has found its target. He studied Marcus for approximately 3 seconds. He did not look at the string line. He did not look at the water bottle in the grass. He did not look at the organized pile of new fence posts by the garage or the bag of concrete mix. He looked at a large black man digging along the fence line of an expensive property in a wealthy neighborhood. 3 seconds. The conclusion was fully formed. He pulled the cruiser to the curb and cut the engine. "Stay close," he said to Decker, without looking at him, already opening his door. Decker stepped out on the passenger side and immediately assessed the scene the way the academy had taught him. He saw a man working in a yard, organized tools, a work glove sitting on top of the post-hole digger handle, a methodical string line, a man who was not startled by the arrival of a police cruiser who turned around with the unhurried movement of someone who had nothing to hide. Decker's first thought was, this is not what Pruitt thinks it is. His second thought was, say nothing. Pruitt walked across the lawn with his hand resting on his taser. Not gripping it, just resting. A posture of casual menace that he had refined over 16 years. He stopped 5 feet from Marcus and said without preamble, "What are you doing here?" Marcus had heard the cruiser pull up. He had finished pulling the post-hole digger from the ground, placed it handle up beside the hole, and turned around. He stood at his full height, unhurried. He recognized the posture immediately. He had seen it in body cam footage 100 times, described it in court filings with clinical precision. The hand on the taser, the wide-legged stance designed to convey dominance rather than de-escalate. The complete absence of any attempt at a greeting. He felt something move through him, not fear, a quiet shift of awareness, like a thermostat adjusting to a temperature change. The gentle Saturday morning moved to the background. Something older and more practiced moved to the front. "Good morning," Officer Marcus said. His voice was deep and even. "I am replacing fence posts. The old ones rotted out at the base. I have got 3 more to go." Pruitt glanced at the hole Marcus had just dug, then back at Marcus, brief and dismissive. "I did not ask what you were doing. I asked what you are doing here." In this neighborhood. At this address. Marcus tilted his head slightly. I live here. You live here. Pruitt said it the way people repeat something they have been told is a joke. Flat. Disbelieving. This is a $2 million neighborhood. I have been patrolling this beat for 5 years. I know who lives on this street. Then you know it recently had a house change hands, Marcus said. This one, 18 days ago. My name is Marcus Ellison. I am the owner of this property. ID, Pruitt said. Not a question. A command. And here it was. Marcus had known it was coming since the moment the cruiser pulled up. The demand without grounds. The order without articulable suspicion. Officer Marcus said, his voice dropping into the register he used in courtrooms, not louder but carrying more weight. I need you to establish the legal basis for that request. Under what reasonable, articulable suspicion are you demanding my identification? I am on my own private property. I have committed no crime. What is the specific basis? He watched Pruitt face. He had expected irritation. What he saw was something closer to fury. The particular fury of a man who had just been spoken to with legal precision by someone he had already categorized, and the categorization had no room for this. Pruitt's jaw set. The hand on the taser pressed down slightly. Behind him, Decker had gone very still. He was standing near the edge of the lawn with an expression that looked, if Marcus had to name it, like dread. I got a call, Pruitt said. Suspicious person report. Individual not recognized by the neighbors digging along the fence line of a property that may or may not be occupied. That is my reasonable suspicion. Now produce your ID. A neighbor failure to recognize me is not reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity, Marcus said. He was speaking slowly and clearly, making sure every word registered on Decker body camera. That is Terry versus Ohio, 392 U.S. 1. The standard requires articulable facts, suggesting criminal activity is afoot. Not that someone is unfamiliar to their neighbor. I am standing on my own private property, officer. I have not done anything that would justify a Terry stop. The vein in Pruitt's neck became visible. Don Pruitt said quietly, stepping closer, Don't quote case law at me. I am not trying to be difficult, Marcus said, and he meant it. I am trying to explain that I do not have a legal obligation to produce identification for you in this situation. If you would like to verify the property ownership, the county assessor office has the record. My name is Marcus Ellison. I bought this house 18 days ago. The fence posts are rotted and I am replacing them. You are refusing a direct order from a police officer. I am declining a request that does not have a lawful basis, Marcus said. There is a difference. It was the calmness that broke Derek Pruitt. Not the legal citations, not the refusal to produce ID. The calmness. The complete, unshakable, infuriating calm of a man standing on his own front lawn in work gloves and an army t-shirt speaking to a uniformed officer with the measured clarity of someone who actually genuinely knew that he was in the right. Pruitt had spent 16 years relying on the power of the uniform to precede him. People did not question it. They did not cite case law at it. They did not look at him with steady eyes and wait patiently for him to justify himself. The uniform was supposed to generate compliance. Not this. That is it, Pruitt said. And there was no warning in it, no escalation sequence, just the flat declaration of a man whose circuit had tripped. He stepped forward, closed the distance in 2 long strides, and grabbed Marcus by the upper arm, his left hand gripping the fabric of the army t-shirt fingers closing on the solid muscle underneath. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Marcus went completely rigid, not in resistance, not a flinch or a pulling back, any movement that could be classified as combative. He simply stopped moving entirely the way a man who has rehearsed this in his mind does when the moment arrives. His hands came open. The work glove on his right hand dropped from his grip. The post-hole digger, which he had been holding loosely at his side, he set down deliberately onto the grass. "I am not resisting," he said, loudly and clearly, his voice carrying across the quiet of the morning. He made sure it carried. "I am not resisting. My hands are open. I am standing on my own property." Pruitt spun him. Marcus turned with the motion rather than fighting it. Controlled, deliberate. Pruitt drove him forward, not against the new fence post, smooth and clean, against the old one, rotted, rough. The weathered cedar scraping hard against Marcus' forearm as Pruitt pressed him into it. The pain was sharp and immediate. Marcus felt it register, logged it, filed it away. He kept his hands up visible behind him. "Hands behind your back," Pruitt barked. "I am complying," Marcus said. "I am complying." From the porch of 209 Birchwood Lane, a screen door opened. Patricia Holden had been watching from the moment the cruiser pulled up, standing back from her front window, telling herself the officers would sort it out efficiently and everything would be resolved in a few minutes. What she saw now made her step through the screen door and onto her porch. The officer had a large man pressed against a fence post. The man-face was turned to the side, pressed against the rough wood. His hands were visible, open. He was not fighting. He was not moving. Patricia gripped the porch railing. She watched the second officer, the young one, standing near the edge of the lawn. He looked like he was going to be sick. He had his hand near his radio, but was not moving. Just standing there. "Hey!" Her voice came out louder than she expected. "What is he doing to him? Leave him alone." Neither officer responded. Pruitt wrenched Marcus' arms behind his back. The handcuffs came off his belt with practiced speed. The metal closed around Marcus' wrists, tightening until the steel bit into the skin. "You are under arrest," Pruitt announced. "Charges are trespassing on private property, failure to identify to a peace officer, and resisting a lawful order." Yad. Decker was staring at the fence posts, at the string line, at the bag of concrete mix, at the organized tools laid out with the care of someone who intended to do a job correctly. His mouth was open slightly. "Greg," he said, barely audible. "I have got it, Decker," not looking at him. Decker closed his mouth. Pruitt frog-marched Marcus across the lawn toward the cruiser. Marcus walked steadily, maintaining his balance with the practiced ease of a man who had spent 2 years in the Army and 30 years in courtrooms. Patricia Holden watched from her porch, one hand over her mouth. Marcus turned his head slightly as Pruitt opened the rear door. He looked not at Pruitt, but at the yard, at the fence posts he had laid out, at the holes he had dug, at the Saturday morning he had planned carefully for no one benefit but his own. Something moved behind his eyes that was not quite grief and not quite anger. It was the particular emotion of a man who has just been confirmed in everything he already knew about the world. "You are making a profound mistake, officer," Marcus said quietly. "Tell it to the judge," Pruitt said, and slammed the door. He walked around to the driver's side with the swagger of a man who had just won something. Decker got in on the passenger side. His face was the color of old chalk. "Greg," Decker said again, barely a whisper, "I think we need to talk about—" "I think you need to trust your training officer," Pruitt said, pulling the cruiser away from the curb. "This is how it is done, Shane. You see a problem, you address it. You do not second-guess it on the curb." Decker looked out the passenger window at the disappearing view of 211 Birchwood Lane. The fence posts, the string line, the water bottle still sitting in the grass. He did not say anything else. In the back seat, Marcus Ellison sat with his wrists cuffed behind him, the steel biting into the bones, the scrape on his forearm already beginning to raise a welt. He breathed deliberately. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. A technique he had learned at Fort Benning in a hostage negotiation training exercise 28 years ago. He looked out the scratched plexiglass window at the passing lawns of Birchwood Lane. He was already making decisions. Marcus Ellison had the title, the education, the evidence, and the plan. But for 3 weeks, he chose to carry what thousands of people carry every single day. The weight of being disbelieved, restrained, processed by a system that had already decided who he was. He did not use his power to escape it. He used his patience to document it completely. How does that make you feel? Do you think it should take a district attorney to make this kind of misconduct visible? Tell us what you think in the comments below. This conversation matters. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe our channel. We tell stories like this because they deserve to be heard. The back seat of a police cruiser is designed to be uncomfortable in ways that go beyond the physical. The seat is hard molded plastic, a single curved piece without the accommodation of upholstered cushions, sloped to keep a person from sitting back naturally. The space is narrow, built not for the dimensions of a grown man, but for the minimal compliance of a secured body. The plexiglass partition between the front and back is scratched from years of contact with handcuffed wrists. It gives the world beyond it a slightly yellow, distorted quality, like looking at the present through old cellophane. The ride from Birchwood Lane to Harrowfield PD took 11 minutes. Marcus counted them. He had long ago, in the early years of public defending, made it a practice to ride in the back of police cruisers, an exercise in understanding what his clients experienced. The physical discomfort was secondary to the psychological one. The message of that space was, you are no longer in control of anything. You do not choose when you stop or start. You do not choose where you go. You are cargo. He breathed, in, hold, out. Through the partition, he could hear Pruitt and Decker. Pruitt was already building the narrative. Marcus could follow the architecture of the story being constructed in real time, each sentence placing another brick in the wall that would become the police report. Aggressive from the start, Pruitt was saying. Refused to identify. Took a bladed stance when I approached. Had a heavy metal implement in his hand. Could absolutely be classified as a weapon in the context of the confrontation. Had to control him before the situation escalated. A pause. These people, Pruitt said, they come out here dressed down, looking like they belong, and 9 times out of 10 they have been casing the neighborhood for a week. You will learn to see it, Shane. It is an instinct. Decker said nothing. Marcus noted the silence. He looked out the scratched plexiglass at the neighborhoods scrolling past. He had driven these streets before. He knew what they looked like from the front seat. They looked different from here. He thought about his clients, 341 of them over 20 years. 341 people who had sat in approximately this same position in approximately this same kind of space on the way to a booking desk where they would be processed like inventory. Most of them had been innocent of the most serious things they were charged with. Many had not been entirely innocent of everything. All of them had been treated as though their guilt was already established. He had read their transcripts. He had watched their body cam footage. He had listened to them describe what this ride felt like, the particular powerlessness of it, the way it hollowed something out of you, the specific degradation of having your rights declared null by someone who outweighed you and carried a weapon and having no immediate recourse. He had understood it intellectually. He was understanding it physically now. And the difference between those two forms of understanding was considerable. The scrape on his forearm burned. The cuffs had been put on with the indifference of someone who did not particularly care about the comfort of the person being secured. His wrists were already aching. He breathed. And then in the back of that cruiser, Marcus Ellison made the decision. He was not going to say his title, not at the station, not during booking, not at his arraignment. He was going to let this go exactly where Pruitt intended it to go. He was going to let the police report get filed, let every lie get signed, and then he was going to appear in that courtroom. Let Derek Pruitt repeat every one of those lies under oath in front of a judge. with a body camera recording playing on the wall behind him, not for revenge. Marcus was past the age and past the disposition for revenge as a motivating principle. For the record, for the 341 people whose transcripts he had read, who had not had a flash drive of body cam footage and a chess game and the bar certification to burn, he leaned his head back against the hard plastic seat and closed his eyes. Tell it to the judge, Pruitt had said. He would. Harrowfield PD occupied a 2-story brick building on Caldwell Avenue, built in 1987. Renovated twice since without ever quite managing to shed the institutional smell of the original construction. A combination of industrial cleaner stale coffee and something underlying that Marcus had come to think of as the particular scent of accumulated paperwork. The building was busier on Saturday mornings than it had any right to be. Pruitt walked Marcus through the double doors with a hand on his bicep that was slightly too firm to be necessary. The bullpen went briefly, subtly alert as they entered. A few officers glanced up. One made eye contact with Pruitt with the expression of a man who had seen this movie before and knows roughly how it ends. No one said anything. Marcus walked with his head up. Desk Sergeant Raymond Okafor was 51 years old, 20 years on the force. He looked up over his reading glasses as Pruitt arrived, with Marcus took in the scene with the practiced assessment of a man who had been doing this since before half the officers on the floor were born, and said name with the flat professional neutrality of someone who was going to get through the stack of paperwork regardless of what drama surrounded it. "He refuses to give it," Pruitt chimed in. "Found him digging near the fence line at 211 Birchwood. Claims he lives there." Okafor looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back. "Name," Okafor said, addressing Marcus directly. "Marcus Ellison," Marcus said. Okafor typed it. "Address: 211 Birchwood Lane, Harrowfield Estates." Okafor cross-referenced the property registry. 8 seconds. His expression did not change, but his eyes moved briefly to Pruitt and then back to the screen. "Property shows a recent sale," he said. "Owner of record is Marcus T. Ellison, deed recorded 14 business days ago." "Address update," Pruitt said without missing a beat. "He could have changed it this week to match his cover. It is not unheard of." Okafor looked at Pruitt for a moment that was about 2 seconds longer than the situation technically required. Then he looked back at his screen. "Occupation," he said to Marcus. This was the moment. Marcus had thought about it in the back of the cruiser. He had run through the options. He could end this now. 2 words. And the entire precinct would restructure itself around the political emergency of having booked the sitting district attorney of Caldwell County for trespassing on his own property. Captain Landy would be called. Pruitt would be pulled out of the room. Apologies would cascade. Someone would get Marcus a cup of coffee and call it a miscommunication. And Pruitt would spend 2 weeks on paid administrative leave. The union would file a brief, and 6 months from now he would be back on Birchwood Lane with a slightly newer cruiser and a slightly more careful story. Marcus looked at Okafor's tired face. "County Legal Department," Marcus said. "General litigation. Vague, accurate, enough." Okafor typed it. He did not look up. Marcus was placed in a holding cell at 9:22 in the morning. He was given 1 phone call at 9:35. He dialed from memory. 2 rings. Leonard Vance picked up on the 2nd ring. "Yeah, it is Marcus." A pause. "I am at Harrowfield PD." A longer pause. "Come again." "I am in a holding cell at Harrowfield PD," Marcus said. "I need you to listen carefully and then do exactly what I tell you without asking questions yet. Can you do that?" "Yes, absolutely. Go ahead." "Pull the body cam footage from Harrowfield PD Patrol Car 31 from this morning. Both officers. The arresting officer and the partner. You need to do this before end of business Monday so it is secured before anyone can claim malfunction. Get digital forensics to certify the chain of custody. I want a full certified copy." "Marcus, what?" "Not yet. Second, pull the full IA file for Officer Derek Pruitt, badge number 1147. Everything. Every complaint. Every settlement. Every union arbitration record. I want the raw file, not the summary. Third, the moment the incident report from this morning is filed and entered into the system, and it will be filed today, probably within the next 4 hours. I want it pulled and preserved, every word. And fourth, call Judge Whitmore clerk first thing Monday morning. Let them know the DA office is taking a personal interest in the matter of State versus Ellison Marcus T. That is it, nothing else. Do not tell anyone in the office what this is about. A silence on the other end. He really has no idea who you are, Leonard said slowly. He has no idea who I am, Marcus confirmed. And you are going to let it go to trial. I am going to let him walk into a courtroom, get on the stand, put his hand on a Bible, and repeat every single lie he told on that lawn today. Under oath, in front of a judge. Another silence. Okay, Leonard said. That is all. I will have it all by Monday afternoon. Marcus hung up. He returned the phone to the officer standing by. He walked back to the holding cell and sat down on the bench. He had 3 weeks. Pruitt filed the incident report at 12:17 that afternoon. He sat at his desk in the open bullpen and typed with the particular confidence of a man who understood that the official record was whatever he said it was. He had written hundreds of these reports. He knew the language. He knew the passive constructions and the legal-sounding phrases. The genre had its own conventions, its own way of making one version of events look like the only possible version. He wrote, "Subject was observed behaving in a suspicious manner, consistent with criminal trespass near the fence line of a residential property in Harrowfield Estates. Upon approach, subject refused to produce identification and became immediately hostile. Subject took an aggressive fighting stance and verbally threatened the safety of the responding officer. Subject was in possession of a heavy metal tool, a post hole digger, which he raised in a threatening manner consistent with intent to use as a weapon. Officer used minimal necessary force to safely detain subject and place him in restraints. Subject verbally resisted throughout the arrest process. Every sentence was a fabrication. Every sentence was signed under penalty of perjury. He submitted it at 12:22 and went to get a fresh cup of coffee. Shane Decker did not sleep well that night. He lay in his apartment with the ceiling fan turning slow circles above him, the report running through his head like a loop he could not exit. He had read it. Aggressive fighting stance. Marcus Ellison had placed his work glove on the ground and opened both hands when Pruitt approached. Verbally threatened the safety of the responding officer. Marcus Ellison had cited Terry versus Ohio, raised the tool in a threatening manner. Marcus Ellison had set the post hole digger down on the grass. Subject verbally resisted throughout. Marcus Ellison had said, "I am complying," while Pruitt pressed his face against a rotted fence post. Decker had tried to bring it up. He had waited until the end of the shift, until they were in the locker room, and he had said carefully that he was concerned about the report, that it did not match his recollection of the events, that the body cam footage would... Pruitt had crossed the locker room in 3 steps and gotten very close to Deckerface. Not touching, not quite, but the physicality of it was unmistakable. "Let me explain something to you about how this works," Pruitt had said, very quietly. "Rookies who go sideways on their training officers do not finish their probationary period. Rookies who file contrary incident reports get transferred to the worst beats in the county and stay there until they either quit or get hurt. Rookies who do what I am telling you to do right now, which is go home and get some sleep and stop thinking about things that are not your concern. Those rookies have long, stable careers. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" Decker had nodded. He had gone home. He did not sleep. At 2 a.m, he got up, went to his desk, and wrote 2 pages of notes. A personal account of the events of that Saturday morning on Birchwood Lane as he had witnessed them, in precise sequence. He wrote the date at the top and the time and his badge number. He found a notary service that opened early Sunday morning, put the pages in an envelope, and sealed it. He did not address the envelope yet. He did not know who it would go to. He just needed it to exist. He needed someone account of what had actually happened to exist somewhere outside of Derek Pruitt police report. He sealed the envelope and put it in the inside pocket of his department jacket. He went back to bed. He still did not sleep. At 209 Birchwood Lane, Patricia Holden was not sleeping either. She had watched the police cruiser pull away from 211 with the man in the back seat. She had stood on her porch for a moment after, looking at the tools still laid out on the lawn next door. The organized tools. The string line pulled taut and precise between two stakes. The water bottle sitting in the grass. She had gone inside. She looked up the county assessor property registry at 8:30 that evening, sitting at her kitchen table with her reading glasses on. She typed in the address, 211 Birchwood Lane, Harrowfield Estates. The screen returned the record within 3 seconds. Owner of record Ellison Marcus T. Purchase, date 16 days prior. Patricia Holden sat at her kitchen table for a long time. The house was very quiet around her. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a neighbor dog barked twice and then went silent. She had called the police because she did not recognize a man working in the yard next door. She had not recognized him because he was new to the neighborhood. He was new to the neighborhood because he had just bought the house and moved in. He had bought the house and moved in because that was his legal right as the owner of that property. She had watched an officer slam that man against a fence post. She had watched the man hands, open, flat, palms visible. While it happened, she took off her reading glasses and set them on the table. She needed to do something. The 3 weeks between the arrest and the trial date moved at different speeds depending on who was living them. For Derek Pruitt, they moved the way good weeks always did, fast and without friction. He was in the break room on Monday, telling the story of the Birchwood arrest with the theatricality of a man who had spent 16 years perfecting the art of the anecdote. The way the guy had cited case law at him. The way he had tried to play it cool right up until the cuffs went on. Classic attempted Con Pruitt concluded. Classic guy who thought he was smart enough to talk his way into a neighborhood he had no business being in. Nobody questioned the narrative. Nobody looked at each other. The room gave Pruitt the specific deference of a group that had long since decided it was easier to give him what he wanted. For Marcus Ellison, the 3 weeks moved with the precision of a countdown. He arrived at the DA office Monday morning at 7:30, looking exactly like what he was. A prosecutor at the beginning of a week of work. Leonard Vance was already there when he arrived, standing by Marcus' desk with a coffee and a hard drive. Footage, Leonard said, setting the drive down. Both cameras. Full duration. Synchronized. Digital forensics certification attached. Chain of custody documented from the moment of original recording through secured transfer. The report, filed at 12:17. Certified copy secured. Leonard paused. It is worse than I expected, Marcus. The language he used, fighting stance, raised the tool, threatened the officer, all of it signed. IA file, 11 complaints, 6 years, 9 involving men of color, 7 black, 2 Latino. 3 complaints resulted in paid leave. 8 were dismissed at the union arbitration stage before formal IA review. There are 2 instances where Captain Landy's signature appears on documents recommending case closure over the reviewing officer recommendation to continue investigation. Marcus let this sit for a moment. And Megan Ferris. She is handling the misdemeanor docket this month. She will get the case assignment automatically. I have made sure she does not see the defendant file, just the charge sheet. She will prep the case as a routine trespass in prosecution. Good. Marcus sat down behind his desk. He connected the hard drive to his monitor. He opened the synchronized footage and watched himself from the outside. The morning light on the lawn, the tools laid out, the cruiser pulling up. He watched Pruitt approach. He watched himself turn around and offer a greeting that was not returned. He watched the conversation. He watched the grab. He watched his own hands come open and the glove drop. He heard his own voice clear on the audio. "I'm not resisting. I'm on my own property. My hands are open." He watched himself being walked to the cruiser. He closed the footage file. He picked up the flash drive that Leonard had placed on the desk, a duplicate copy clean and ready, and put it in his inside jacket pocket. One other thing Leonard said. He set a piece of paper on the desk, a printout of a voicemail transcript from the DA General tip line, left at 9:17 on Sunday morning. The caller identified herself as Patricia Holden. She said she was the 911 caller who had reported the suspicious person at 211 Birchwood Lane. She said she had been wrong. She said she had information about what she had witnessed that she believed was relevant. She left her phone number. Marcus read the transcript twice. He set it down carefully. He called her that afternoon. For Shane Decker, the 3 weeks moved in the slow, grinding way of a man waiting for something he knows is coming but cannot see clearly enough to prepare for. He went through his shifts. He went through the motions. He said nothing about Birchwood Lane. He avoided Pruitt when he could. He kept the envelope in the inside pocket of his department jacket every single day. He changed the civilian address on the outside of the envelope once he confirmed through a public records search on his own time who was the presiding judge for the misdemeanor docket this month. Judge Carol Whitmore. He addressed the envelope to her clerk office and wrote in his careful handwriting, "Not to be opened except in connection with State versus Ellison Marcus T." He did not mail it. He carried it in his jacket. He waited. The arraignment notice arrived on Pruitt's desk 3 days before the trial date. A white envelope, standard government issue. County court seal in the upper left corner. Pruitt picked it up, opened it, read it in approximately 15 seconds. State versus Ellison, Marcus T. Courtroom 4, Harrowfield County Courthouse. Tuesday at 9 a.m. Presiding Judge Carol Whitmore. Prosecution Assistant District Attorney Megan Ferris. Defendant Ellison Marcus T. Pro C. Pruitt noted the Pro C designation and felt a small, satisfied amusement move through him. The man was going to represent himself. This happened sometimes. People who had watched too much legal television. People who genuinely believed that if they just said the right things in the right order, the system would work in their favor. It almost never worked. The testimony of an experienced officer delivered with professional calm was worth more than any amount of case law recited by a non-attorney in a misdemeanor courtroom. This was going to be easy. 20 minutes. $100 in overtime for sitting in a chair and telling the truth about a criminal who had tried to play games. He put the notice in the folder and did not think about it again. At the DA office, Marcus met with Leonard one final time the Friday before the trial. The meeting was short. Ferris is prepped for a routine trespassing prosecution, Leonard confirmed. She has the charge sheet, Pruitt incident report, and standard procedural briefing. She does not have the defendant file. She does not know who the defendant is. What happens when she sees me walk in? She knows you. She is going to know. Yes, Marcus said. I know. I am counting on her professionalism. He paused. She is good. She is. She is going to be very stressed. That is appropriate. And you, Leonard said. You are going to represent yourself, which technically means you cannot conduct a formal cross-examination as counsel. I have thought about it, Marcus said. I am going to request the right to address the court and question the witness as the defendant, not as counsel. Judge Whitmore allows pro-SC defendants expanded latitude for direct questioning. I have been in her courtroom enough times. She is not going to restrict me to a written statement. And when Pruitt is on the stand, I am going to walk him through his testimony, piece by piece. Ask him to confirm each element under oath. Marcus looked at the flash drive. And then I'm going to introduce Exhibit A. Leonard nodded slowly. And then Marcus said we let the footage speak. The Harrowfield County Courthouse on Caldwell Avenue was a building that took itself seriously, as courts tend to do. Limestone facade, broad stone steps, double doors of dark oak opening into a marble lobby where sound moved differently than it did in the rest of the world. More formally, more carefully, as though the building itself understood that what happened inside it had consequences. On Tuesday morning, the building was its usual organized chaos of legal machinery in motion. Derek Pruitt arrived at 8:40 in his full Class A dress uniform. He had pressed it himself that morning. He had shined his shoes. He had polished his badge and his nameplate until they caught the light with satisfying precision. He was carrying a thick manila folder. Nothing he had been asked to bring. Just the kind of supporting ammunition he liked to have available. He found Shane Decker sitting on a wooden bench outside Courtroom 4 when he arrived. Decker looked the way a man looks when he has not slept well for 3 weeks. There were shadows under his eyes. His posture was slightly too rigid, the kind of rigid that is not confidence but the attempt to impersonate it. Pruitt sat down beside him, clapped him on the shoulder with enough force to make Decker flinch. "Relax, Shane. This is the good part. We walk in, we tell the judge exactly what happened, and the guy gets a permanent record. Easy case. Easiest overtime pay we will make this month." Decker looked at his hands. "I reviewed the report again, Greg. Good. It does not match the body cam footage." Pruitt turned to look at him. The look was patient. In the way that a large animal can be patient when it is deciding whether it needs to exert itself. "Shane, I am just saying the footage, if they even pull it, which they will not for a misdemeanor resisting charge, will show a highly charged, dynamic situation in which an experienced officer made rapid, contextually appropriate decisions. That is what footage shows. That is what I testified in the report it shows." He leaned in slightly. "You keep your mouth shut and your eyes forward, and in 45 minutes this is done, and we go get breakfast. Understand?" Decker looked at the manila envelope in his inside jacket pocket. He could feel its outline against his chest. "Yeah," he said. "I understand." Inside Courtroom 4, Megan Ferris was at the prosecution table at 8:50. She was 29 years old, precise and capable. 14 months at the DA office, building a reputation as someone who prepared thoroughly and argued cleanly. She had 30 cases on her list this morning. State versus Ellison Marcus T. was 19th in the stack. Trespassing, failure to identify, resisting a peace officer. She had read the incident report twice, noted the procedural straightforwardness of it, expected a quick plea or a brief trial. She sorted her files, drank her coffee. She did not look at the defendant file because she did not have the defendant file. The bailiff announced the opening of court at 9:03. Judge Carol Whitmore entered from the side door. Judge Whitmore was 61 years old, 28 years on the bench. A small woman with silver hair cut efficiently close. A reputation for 3 things: absolute punctuality, encyclopedic recall of case precedent, and zero tolerance for courtroom theater. She settled into her chair, put on her reading glasses, looked at the docket. The bailiff called the case. State of Ohio versus Ellison Marcus T. Docket, number 2024-C-441. Charges: criminal trespass, failure to identify, resisting a peace officer. Megan stood at the prosecution table, organized her papers, and looked toward the gallery for the defendant. The gallery door opened. Marcus Ellison walked in. He was not wearing the Army t-shirt and the work gloves. He was wearing a custom charcoal 3-piece suit with a burgundy tie. His shoes impeccably polished. His posture carrying the particular quality of authority that had nothing to do with the clothes and everything to do with 30 years of walking into rooms where people needed to believe the person standing in front of them. He walked down the center aisle without hurrying, without looking at Pruitt, without looking at the judge. He looked at Megan Ferris, and Megan Ferris looked at him. She had met Marcus Ellison exactly twice. Once at his swearing-in ceremony, once at a department-wide staff meeting 12 days ago. She had stood in the back row and thought that the new DA had the quiet, undemonstrative confidence of a man who had won things in difficult circumstances for a very long time. She recognized him immediately. The pen she had been holding dropped from her hand and hit the table with a small, precise sound. She was very careful not to let her face do what it wanted to do. Marcus reached the defense table. He set down the single item he had brought with him. A small silver flash drive, placed precisely in the center of the table. He looked at Megan. 1 second of eye contact. A single, almost imperceptible shake of his head. The gesture said, "Proceed as planned." The gesture said, "Hold." Megan picked up her pen. Her hands were not quite steady. She looked back at her notes. She breathed. "Is the defense ready?" Judge Whitmore asked, peering over her glasses at the defense table. "The defense is ready, Your Honor," Marcus said. His voice was warm, professional, absolutely composed. Judge Whitmore looked at him for a moment. Then she wrote something on her notepad, and the trial began. Megan called Pruitt as the prosecution first and only witness. Pruitt walked to the witness box with the confidence of a man who had done this 40 or 50 times, deeply comfortable, the way an athlete is comfortable in the arena where they have always performed. He was sworn in. He sat down. He placed his folder on the railing in front of him. He did not open it. He did not need it. He had the story memorized. He looked at Megan and then briefly at the gallery, making eye contact the way a man presents himself to an audience. He smiled slightly at Judge Whitmore. She did not smile back. Megan asked him to describe the events of Saturday morning, May 14th. He began. His testimony was smooth. Practiced, but not so practiced as to seem rehearsed. Just the well-worn fluency of someone who had told the same story enough times that it had become his truth. The dispatch call, the arrival on Birchwood Lane, the suspicious individual at the fence line, the refusal to identify, the aggressive response, the threatening stance, the tool raised in a manner consistent with intent to use as a weapon, the minimal necessary force used to protect officer safety. He said officer safety 3 times in approximately 3 minutes. It was a technique Marcus recognized from 100 police reports. The phrase functioned as a legal talisman, invoked to retroactively justify nearly any action. Every word was perjury. Pruitt said it all while looking calmly at the judge. He was performing sincerity, and he was good at it. He had been good at it for 16 years. In the gallery, Decker sat with his hands flat on his thighs and his jaw set, his eyes fixed at a point approximately 18 inches above the witness box. He did not look at Pruitt. He did not look at the defendant. He was managing himself with the careful effort of someone who was holding something in and was determined not to lose the grip. 3 rows behind Decker, Patricia Holden sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching Derek Pruitt with the measured, disappointed expression of a retired school teacher who has just watched a student lie about something significant. She had come on her own. Nobody had asked her to come. Megan asked 3 questions. She kept them narrow, procedural, and sat down quickly. "The defendant may address the court, Judge," Whitmore said. Marcus stood. He buttoned his jacket. A small, unhurried gesture. 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, establishing for everyone watching that the person performing it was in no hurry whatsoever, he walked from the defense table toward the witness box. No notes in his hand. He stopped at the appropriate distance from the witness, looked at Derek Pruitt. Pruitt looked back. His expression was still composed, but something had shifted in it. The civilian defendant in the custom suit who walked like he owned the floor was more unsettling than he had expected. Officer Pruitt Marcus began. His voice was conversational, the way a doctor voice is conversational when asking questions he already knows the answers to. "You testified under oath this morning that upon arriving at the scene you observed the defendant in what you described as an aggressive fighting stance. Is that correct?" "That is correct," Pruitt said. "And you testified that I verbally threatened your life and the safety of your partner. Is that correct? That is correct. And you testified that I raised the post-hole digger in a threatening manner consistent with intent to use it as a weapon. Is that correct? Pruitt paused. Approximately 1 second. Not enough to be a visible hesitation, but enough. That is correct. And you are saying all of this under oath, fully understanding that perjury in an Ohio court of law is a third-degree felony. I understand, Pruitt said. He leaned forward very slightly. I told the truth in my report, and I'm telling the truth now. Marcus nodded slowly. Let us test that. He turned to Judge Whitmore. Your Honor, I would like to submit Defense Exhibit A into evidence. It is a flash drive containing 2 synchronized video recordings from the events of Saturday, May 14th. Specifically, the body camera footage from Officer Pruitt vest camera and the body camera footage from his partner Officer Decker vest camera recorded simultaneously from the moment of their arrival on Birchwood Lane through the conclusion of my detention. The chain of custody documentation came with it. A certified digital forensics report. The evidence request timestamp from the county system, clean and unassailable. Pruitt hands closed around the front rail of the witness box. He opened his mouth. He caught himself, closed it. He was not counsel. He could not object. He turned to Megan with an expression that was for the first time that morning something other than professional calm. Megan Ferris stood. Your Honor, the prosecution would request a brief moment to review chain of custody documentation before. The chain of custody documentation is attached, Marcus said. Digital forensics certification from Caldwell County Evidence Lab. Evidence request timestamp confirmed at Monday morning, 60 hours after the arrest. Full system log included. Judge Whitmore held out her hand. The bailiff delivered the flash drive and the documentation. She examined it with the focused speed of a woman who knew exactly what she was looking at. 20 seconds. The exhibit is admitted, Judge Whitmore said. The monitor on the courtroom wall was a large, flat panel display that normally showed case reference documents. The bailiff connected the flash drive. The footage loaded. The courtroom went quiet, not the polite quiet of a room waiting for something. The particular absolute quiet of a room that understands it is about to see something that matters. The footage began. It played from Decker camera first, the wider view, the establishing shot. You could see the cruiser pulling to the curb. You could see Pruitt getting out with a purpose that read immediately and unmistakably as aggression rather than inquiry. You could see Marcus Ellison in his front yard turning around at the sound of boots on the driveway. Turning around with the unhurried movement of a man who was expecting nothing more threatening than a neighbor wave. The audio was perfect. Good morning, officer, Marcus' voice, warm and direct. No response from Pruitt. Immediate. What are you doing here? The sequence that followed played out in real time. The demand for ID without grounds. Marcus citation of Terry versus Ohio. Clear, measured. Spoken like a man who had taught this concept to law students. Pruitt escalating frustration visible in his posture, in the way his hand pressed harder on the taser. And then, the grab. The courtroom watched it happen. Pruitt hand closing on Marcus' arm. Marcus going rigid. Not combative, not pulling away, just stopping. The work glove dropping from his hand visible on camera. The post-hole digger being lowered deliberately onto the grass. I'm not resisting. My hands are open. I am on my own property. The words landed in the courtroom with the weight of something that had been waiting 3 weeks to be heard by the right people in the right room. Pruitt pressing Marcus against the fence post. The scrape of wood against forearm. The cuffs going on. And Marcus' voice still even. I am complying. I am complying. The footage ended. 4 seconds of silence. Then the murmur began. Not loud, not disruptive, but the unavoidable sound of a room full of people processing what they had just seen against what they had just heard from the witness stand. Judge Whitmore let it run for approximately 3 seconds. Then her expression made clear that silence was required. The room complied. Pruitt's dress uniform still looked impeccable. but the man inside it was perspiring through the fabric at the collar, and the color of his face had moved from its usual ruddy confidence into something closer to gray. He was gripping the rail of the witness box with both hands. He had not been gripping it before the footage played. Marcus walked back toward the witness box. Not rushing, no theatrical urgency. He moved with the pace of a man who understood that what he was about to do required no dramatics whatsoever. The footage had done most of the work. What remained was simply accounting. "Officer Pruitt," he said. His voice had lost its conversational warmth. Not hostile. Something more precise than hostile. The specific register of an attorney in the moment when questions become a mechanism of accountability rather than inquiry. "You testified under oath that I took an aggressive fighting stance when you approached." Pruitt's jaw worked. The situation was, "Officer Pruitt, in the footage, we just watched the footage from your own department body cameras. At what moment did you observe me take an aggressive fighting stance?" Silence. "The angle?" Pruitt started. The footage was 4K resolution. Both cameras synchronized. There were no meaningful angle issues. "I am asking you a direct question. At what moment in the footage did you observe the aggressive fighting stance you testified to under oath this morning?" More silence. "You testified you heard me verbally threaten your life," Marcus continued. "At what moment in the footage did you hear me verbally threaten your life?" He. The situation was dynamic. There were moments. "Officer Pruitt." His voice dropped, not quieter, more concentrated. "Yes or no? Did you hear me verbally threaten your life in that footage?" Pruitt's mouth opened. What came out was not an answer. It was the sound of a man whose story had stopped working. A stammer that collapsed into fragments. He was the totality of the circumstances I was fearing for. Marcus turned to Judge Whitmore. "Your Honor," he said, "Officer Pruitt has testified under oath to an aggressive fighting stance. Verbal threats against officer safety and the raising of a tool as a weapon. The footage your court has just admitted into evidence certified by digital forensics recorded by Officer Pruitt, own department-issued equipment, shows none of these things. It shows me offering a polite greeting that was not returned. It shows me citing my Fourth Amendment rights when asked for identification without grounds. It shows me placing the tool on the ground and opening my hands before any physical contact was made. It shows me stating clearly and repeatedly that I was not resisting. It shows me being pressed against a fence post on my own property while in full compliance with every instruction given." He let this land. "What Officer Pruitt has done in this courtroom this morning is commit felony perjury. What Officer Pruitt did 18 days ago is file a sworn police report containing fabricated statements of fact. What Officer Pruitt did on the morning of May 14th is conduct an unlawful stop without reasonable articulable suspicion, conduct an unlawful arrest without probable cause, and commit battery under color of law." He named the specific statutes. Ohio, Revised Code 2921.11. Perjury. ORC 2935.26. Unlawful arrest. Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Deprivation of rights under color of law. He said them with the economy of someone citing coordinates. From the gallery, two things happened simultaneously. Shane Decker stood up. He did not wait for anyone to call him. He did not raise his hand. He simply stood, reached into the inside pocket of his department jacket, and withdrew the sealed envelope. He walked to the end of his row, stepped into the aisle, approached the bailiff standing near the front of the gallery. "My name is Officer Shane Decker. Badge 1203. Harrowfield PD," he said. His voice was steady in a way that had cost him something to achieve. "I was the secondary officer present at the arrest on Birchwood Lane on May 14th. This is a sealed personal account of the events as I witnessed them, dated, signed, and notarized on May 15th. I am prepared to testify to its contents." He handed the envelope to the bailiff. 3 rows back, Patricia Holden stood. "Your Honor." Her voice was the voice of a woman who had taught 28 fourth graders to raise their hand and speak clearly for 31 years. The courtroom responded to it with the instinctive attention that a teacher voice commands. "My name is Patricia Holden. I live at 209 Birchwood Lane, directly adjacent to the defendant property. I am the person who placed the initial 911 call. I would like to make a statement to this court." Judge Whitmore looked at both of them. She looked at the envelope in her hands. She looked at the monitor where the footage had just played. She looked at Pruitt in the witness box where he had stopped sweating and gone still with the particular stillness of someone who has arrived at the end of something and does not yet know what comes next. She set the envelope down. She looked at Patricia Holden. "Ma'am, please approach." Patricia walked to the front of the courtroom. She stood before the judge with the dignity of someone who has decided to tell the truth about something she would have preferred not to have to tell the truth about. "I called the non-emergency line," she said. "I reported a suspicious person at the property next door because I saw a man I did not recognize working near the fence line, and I did not think he belonged there. I have lived on that street for 22 years. That man," she looked at Marcus, "has lived on that street for 18 days. He is the owner of that property. He was working in his own yard." She paused, took a careful breath. "When I stepped onto my porch after the officers arrived, I did not see an aggressive man resisting arrest. I saw a man with his hands open being pressed against a fence post. That is what I witnessed. That is what I am prepared to testify to under oath." Judge Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Pruitt. Marcus returned to the defense table. He stood behind it. He placed his hands flat on the surface, the same deliberate, controlled gesture he used when he needed a courtroom to focus. "Your Honor," he said, "before the court addresses the matter of Officer Pruitt testimony, I would like to formally introduce myself for the record." The gallery was still. Megan Ferris had been still for approximately the last 10 minutes. Managing herself with the effort of a woman navigating entirely by professional instinct in a situation for which no professional training had prepared her. Pruitt was looking at Marcus from the witness box. Something had begun moving behind his eyes. A slow, dawning recognition that the architecture of the morning had shifted, that the ground had been changing underfoot since the moment this man had walked into the room in that suit, and that wherever this was going, it was not anywhere Pruitt had planned to end up. Marcus said, "My name is Marcus Ellison." Pause. 3 full seconds, during which the only sound in the courtroom was the faint hum of the building ventilation system. "I am the District Attorney of Caldwell County, Ohio." The gallery gasped, not a polite sound. The involuntary vocalization of a room in which something had just changed the entire frame of the morning. People shifted in their seats. Someone near the back audibly said something that got cut off. Megan Ferris pressed her hand flat on the table in front of her and stared at the surface. And Derek Pruitt, in his full Class A dress uniform, his brass polished, his nameplate gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Derek Pruitt's face went the color of old ash. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He had arrested the District Attorney of Caldwell County. He had cuffed him on his own lawn. He had pressed his face against a fence post. He had walked him through the bullpen. He had filed a sworn police report, calling him an aggressive criminal who had threatened an officer life. And now he was sitting on a witness stand under oath in front of that man-colleague, having just repeated every one of those lies in front of a judge, with the body cam footage playing on the wall behind him. His hands were shaking. He could see them shaking and could not stop them. "I do not believe," he started. Megan Marcus said, looking at the junior ADA. "The prosecution may move to dismiss." Megan Ferris stood up. Her voice was remarkably controlled. Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges against the defendant Marcus T. Ellison with prejudice. Granted, Judge Whitmore said. She said it before Megan finished the sentence. She turned to Pruitt, looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, with the specific and thorough disgust of a person who has spent 28 years on the bench protecting the integrity of the law she serves and has just watched it weaponized from the witness stand. Officer Pruitt, she said, you have testified to this court under oath to a sequence of events that has been definitively contradicted by your own department recorded footage and by the sworn account of your partner and a civilian eyewitness. You have filed a sworn police report containing material fabrications. You have committed unlawful arrest and battery against a citizen of this state who you detained without grounds. And you have done all of this against the sitting district attorney of Caldwell County. She folded her hands. Her voice was very quiet and very final. Bailiff, issue a bench warrant for Officer Derek Pruitt on charges of felony perjury, filing a false sworn police report, and contempt of this court. He is to be taken into custody immediately. Bail is denied. Two bailiffs moved toward the witness box. Pruitt did not run. He looked at them coming, and something left his body. The last of whatever it was that had been holding him upright in that chair. He slid sideways, his legs giving under him, and one of the bailiffs caught him by the arm and kept him from going to the floor entirely. He was crying by the time they got him standing, not dignified tears, not the tears of a man who had maintained composure to the end, openly weeping, the sounds of it loud in the shocked silence of the courtroom. His face contorted with the specific terror of someone who has just understood completely that the world they operated in is gone. Mr. Freeman, he managed, reaching toward Marcus with one hand as the bailiffs began securing his wrists. Please, my pension. I have 15 years. Marcus looked at him. The expression on Marcus' face was not vindictive, not cold. It was the specific, sorrowful recognition of a man who had sat across from 341 clients and heard what happens when the system gets to decide who matters. Not satisfaction exactly, the quieter thing on the other side of satisfaction. You should have thought about your pension, Marcus said, before you decided that you could make yourself the law. The bailiffs walked Pruitt out. The courtroom erupted. The applause that broke out in the gallery was not performative. It was the involuntary sound of a room full of people watching something that the day had not promised them. A moment in which what should happen actually happened. Judge Whitmore allowed it for 4 seconds. Then her gavel came down once, and the room settled. Mr. Ellison, she said, looking at Marcus directly, you are free to go. And for the record, it is an honor to share this bar with you. I am sorry that it required this to demonstrate why. Marcus inclined his head. Thank you, Your Honor. 6 months. That is how long it took for real consequences to land. And only because the man they arrested happened to have a law degree, a flash drive, and 20 years of knowing exactly where the lies lived in a police report. What about the people who do not have those things? What would have happened to an ordinary man on that lawn? Someone without the title, without the recording, without the resources. Think about that for a moment, and then think about the 3 other people who came forward after this story became public. 3 people who had been through a version of this and had nowhere to go. Their stories mattered just as much. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe our channel, because these stories deserve an audience. Judge Carol Whitmore had been on the bench for 28 years, and in 28 years she had developed a reputation for one thing above all others, consistency. She applied the law the same way regardless of who was before her. So when she instructed the bailiffs to walk Officer Derek Pruitt through the main courthouse corridor, the public corridor with its marble floors and high ceilings, and the constant movement of courthouse traffic rather than through the secure back exit, she was not being theatrical. She was being consistent. Consequences in her courtroom were public. That was the point of them. Pruitt was walked through the main corridor in handcuffs at 10:40 in the morning, still wearing his Class A dress uniform, still with the badge on his chest, because the formal stripping of it was a departmental procedure that would happen separately. The courthouse was busy at 10:40. Attorneys moved through on their way to various courtrooms. Court officers crossed the lobby. Members of the public navigated the space on their various errands. They all saw him. Some recognized the uniform immediately and stopped. Others registered it by degrees. The handcuffs first, then the bailiff escort, then the wet-faced, slumped-shoulder reality of a man being marched somewhere he did not want to go. The particular silence that opened around him as he moved through the lobby was not the silence of people who did not care. It was the silence of people who understood that what they were witnessing mattered. Pruitt did not look at anyone. He stared at the middle distance and walked and wept and said nothing. The first 48 hours moved fast. Within 6 hours of the courtroom events, Leonard Vance had filed formal civil rights complaints with the Caldwell County Internal Affairs Division and the State Attorney General Office against both Officer Derek Pruitt and Captain Norris Landy. Landy specifically for the documented instances of suppressing complaint investigations and signing off on closure documents that overrode his own IA reviewer's recommendations. By end of business Tuesday, Captain Landy was placed on administrative leave. The union filed a motion to intervene in the IA investigation. The Caldwell County DA office, Marcus Ellison office, responded to the motion within 24 hours. The motion was denied. Wednesday morning, the Caldwell County Examiner ran the story on the front page. By Thursday, it had been picked up by 3 statewide news outlets and 1 national wire service. The headline, DA arrested on own lawn officer charged with perjury. Pruitt Internal Affairs file unsealed by court order ran as a sidebar. 11 complaints over 6 years. 9 involving men of color. 0 meaningful discipline. 6 civil rights lawsuits settled by the city for a combined $237,000. The names of the complainants who had never received any form of official acknowledgement appeared in print for the first time. By the Friday of that week, 3 more complainants had come forward. 2 men and 1 woman, each with their own account of encounters with Derek Pruitt. Each with their own version of the specific indignity of being held down by authority with no recourse. Marcus' office opened a formal investigation into each of the new complaints that afternoon. Shane Decker submitted his full formal internal affairs statement on Wednesday morning. He sat across from Sergeant Torres, a IA investigator transferred in from the county sheriff office, specifically because Harrowfield PD had its own conflict of interest issues given Captain Landy involvement, and he told the truth, all of it, from the moment the radio call came in to the moment the cruiser pulled away from 211 Birchwood Lane. The organized tools, the string line, the post-hole digger placed on the grass, the open hands, the words I am not resisting, the locker room conversation after. He named everything. He held nothing back. His cooperation was noted by the court in the formal record of the Pruitt case. Decker was not terminated. He was not transferred. He was placed on administrative duty pending the resolution of the broader investigation with a note in his file that his cooperation had been complete and voluntary. He went home that Wednesday night and slept for 11 hours, for the first time in 3 weeks. Patricia Holden wrote the letter by hand. She had considered typing it, considered the laptop open on her kitchen table, and then decided that what she needed to say required the effort and the slowness of handwriting. The effort was part of the point. The slowness was part of the acknowledgement. She wrote 3 drafts before she was satisfied that she was saying exactly what she meant to say, without softening, without hedging, without retreating into the language of vague regret that was easier but less honest. She began with a statement of fact that she had placed the call to the non-emergency line. She did not write, "I thought I was being responsible," or "I was worried about the neighborhood." She wrote, "I made a call to the police about a man I did not recognize because I saw a black man I did not know working near the fence line, and I did not know him because he had recently moved in. I assumed he did not belong there. I assumed this without evidence and without reason beyond the fact that he was unfamiliar to me." She wrote about 22 years on that street. The comfortable certainty of someone who had never had to question what that certainty was based on, because it had never cost her anything. She had never asked herself what the criteria for belonging actually were. She wrote, "I stepped onto my porch and I watched an officer press a compliant man against a fence post because I had made a phone call. That is something I have to live with. I do not write this letter to ask for absolution. I write it because you deserve to know that a witness saw what happened, and that witness was wrong to have started it and knows it." She ended with a question. Not rhetorical, a genuine question. She wrote, "I know you are the district attorney and that this letter arrives at an unusual time, but I am also your neighbor. If you are willing, I would like to speak with you. Not as a DA, just as people who live on the same street. You do not owe me that. I understand if the answer is no." She folded the letter into thirds, put it in an envelope, walked it to 211 Birchwood Lane herself on a Thursday evening when the street was quiet and the late spring light was turning everything golden. She put it in his mailbox. She walked home without looking back. Marcus found it Friday morning, bringing in the mail before going into the office. He stood in his driveway in his suit jacket and read it there, in the morning light, which was not unlike the morning light 3 weeks ago when he had been driving fence posts into the clay earth of his front yard. He read it twice. He went inside. He put it in a folder. He would call her. He believed genuinely in the possibility that people could reckon with what they had done. His entire career as a public defender had been built on the proposition that people were more than the worst thing they had done on the worst day of their decision-making. He extended this proposition to Patricia Holden without effort, and without the performance of extending it. He simply did. The letter was honest. Honest letters were rare. He appreciated it. 6 months after the morning on Birchwood Lane, the accounting was complete. Derek Pruitt was convicted in Caldwell County Superior Court on all counts: felony perjury, filing a false sworn police report, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, battery under color of law. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Judge Catherine Reeves delivered the sentence on a Tuesday morning in November. 54 months in federal custody. No parole eligibility for the first 36. His law enforcement certification was permanently and irrevocably revoked. He would never carry a badge in any jurisdiction in the United States again. His pension, which he had accrued over 16 years, was stripped in full under Ohio public corruption statutes. Captain Norris Landy's situation resolved on a parallel track. Forced into retirement. Forfeiture of 20% of his pension through civil settlement. A federal injunction prohibiting him from serving in any supervisory law enforcement capacity for the remainder of his working life. The Department of Justice opened an inquiry into Harrowfield PD complaint suppression practices. It ultimately resulted in a consent decree requiring independent monitoring of the Department Internal Affairs processes for 5 years. The 3 additional complainants who had come forward were each assigned to an independent attorney through a civil rights legal fund that Marcus established through the DA office. 2 of the cases resulted in civil settlements. The 3rd was still pending. Shane Decker requested a transfer to community outreach. He did not ask for the assignment. He asked for the posting, which was technically available and seldom requested because it offered less overtime and required a different kind of patience than patrol. Interim Captain Samuels approved the transfer without comment. Decker spent his first morning in the new role sitting in a community meeting room at the Harrowfield Recreation Center, listening to residents from the neighborhoods most heavily impacted by Pruitt patrols describe what those years had been like. He did not say much. He took notes. He came back the next week and the week after that. He had decided that the most useful thing he could do was understand before he tried to help. He was 24 years old and he had a great deal to learn. And he had the particular advantage of knowing this clearly and being willing to sit with it. Marcus Ellison finished replacing the fence posts at 211 Birchwood Lane on the last Saturday of October. The weather had turned. The heat of May was long gone, replaced by the crisp, clear cold of Ohio autumn. The sky above the oak trees a deep, saturated blue with the clarity that comes when summer haze finally relents. He worked the same way he had worked in May, steady, unhurried, methodical. The post-hole digger going down into the clay. The new posts going in plumb and true. The concrete mixed and poured and left to cure. He set the string line between the marker stakes the same way he had done it the first time, ensuring everything would come out straight. He wore the same army t-shirt, now washed and folded and unfolded again, and the same work gloves. When he had the last post tamped and the concrete drying in the hole, he stood up and stretched his back and looked at the fence line. It was clean and straight, and it would last 20 years, which was roughly how long fence posts were supposed to last when they were properly installed. From the porch at 209 Birchwood Lane, Patricia Holden's screen door opened. She came out with her coffee the way she apparently always did on Saturday mornings. She looked over and raised one hand in a greeting that was not complicated. Just a wave from one neighbor to another. Marcus raised his hand back. They had spoken twice since the letter. Once on the phone briefly, and once over the fence on a Tuesday evening in September when Marcus had gotten home late from a long day and Patricia had been in her garden. The conversations had not been about the law or the case or any of the machinery of what had happened. They had been about the oak tree in his front yard, which she said was at least 60 years old, and about her late husband, Gerald, and about what the winters were like in Harrowfield, which Marcus had not yet experienced. They had been the conversations of two people on the same street who were in the process of becoming cautiously and genuinely neighbors. He drove the post-hole digger into the ground one last time, pulling up the final marker stake and setting the string line aside. He packed up his tools. He carried them back to the garage. The fence line was done. Derek Pruitt walked into that courtroom on a Tuesday morning believing the most dangerous thing a person in a position of authority can believe. That the power he carried was the same thing as the truth. He said it under oath. He wore the uniform. He polished the brass. He folded his hands and looked at the judge with the calm face of a man who had done this many times and always walked out unchanged. He did not walk out unchanged this time. He walked out in restraints in the corridor he had expected to leave as a hero past the people he had counted on not to see him clearly. They saw him clearly. Marcus Ellison did not fight with rage. He did not fight with the urgency of a man who felt wronged, though he was wronged, profoundly, physically, in front of his own house on a Saturday morning. He fought with patience, and with law, and with the specific, quiet dignity of a man who had spent 30 years learning exactly what the truth looked like when it was documented correctly. He fought for himself, and he fought for 341 people whose names are not in this story, but whose experiences made it possible for him to know in the back of a police cruiser with his wrists in cuffs exactly what to do. The fence at 211 Birchwood Lane is straight now. The posts are set deep and clean, the line running true from one end to the other. The oak tree still stands in the front yard, 60 years old and rooted far below anything temporary. The neighborhood is quiet. The only thing that has changed is that the people on that street know now exactly who their neighbor is. And so does every officer in Caldwell County, and every officer who hears this story, and every person who thinks that a badge is an answer to a question that was never asked. If this story moved you, if it made you think about something you had not thought about before or reminded you of something you already knew, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Marcus' position? Would you have had the patience to stay silent in that holding cell knowing what you knew? We read every single response, and if you want more stories like this, stories where the truth gets documented, where the record gets set straight, where people who believed they were untouchable find out what that word actually costs. Subscribe our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss one. Thank you for watching this story with us. We know it was not an easy one. Not because it is fictional, but because the things that make it ring true are real and close and ongoing. Every person who watches to the end is choosing to pay attention. And paying attention is where everything begins. We see you, and we appreciate you more than we can say. See you in the next one.